we'll shift over to weather. And well, I think most people will probably agree that this is a fairly favorable forecast that we're looking at. Very, very straightforward and quite a change from at least where we've been over the last couple of weeks. But with that theme and starting on that note, would like to start with a reminder of where much of the central and eastern United States has been here over the last few weeks. We've had, because of a highly amplified jet stream pattern across North America, unusually amplified for this time of the year, for the middle of the summer. We've seen a number of weather systems with strong dynamics and a large number of severe weather events, severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, you name it. This is the total storm reports from earlier this week on Monday. And the point here, you look at the spatial variability here, and Michigan has just been mostly on the northern edge or north fringe of this very, very active storm track through the middle and eastern part of the country. I guess that's a good thing. We have had reports of high winds, primarily a little bit of hail. There was a tornado actually in northern Indiana, close to the border in Michigan. We have had a couple of those earlier in the year in Michigan, but in general, Michigan has been just north of where we've seen the most active severe weather. And that's something to remember. But the bottom line is ultimately here, very, very, very active, with a very active storm track. We've had a number of systems, including the remnants of Hurricane Beryl here a week and a half ago, that have led to unusually wet conditions across much of the region. And that's where I'm going next here. On the far left, we'll start with temperature, just to throw that in there. We don't want to ignore that, but it was another warmer than normal week. Last week, mean temperatures across Michigan averaged from 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. That's, again, averaged over the entire week. And you can see that was the case for virtually all of the Midwest and the Corn Belt. The big news, of course, again, at least 2, and in some cases 3 major precipitation events during the past week. In the middle here with our weekly total, this is through yesterday morning, above normal rainfall over all of the state, but especially across the south and the east central parts of the state here. The yellow coloring there denotes 2 inches or greater. In some cases, we saw 3 and 4 inches, and that fell on following a week of similar rainfall. Now, on the far right here, I also wanted, for some perspective, it's important to look at this. The average rainfall for the whole month of July, if we look again at what the climatology says, generally in the low 3s. Of course, the warm season is where the wetter time of the year. July typically is not the wettest month at most spots, but still we get a fair amount of quite a bit of rainfall actually during the month. But if we take the totals over the last 30 days, going back to the middle of June through the middle of July, you can see that almost all of the state has been above normal, but especially across the southern half of lower Michigan. Some spots picked up more than 10 inches of rain during that time frame. Again, at least some cases 300% of normal, but you can see with the graphic here on the far right, much of that area more than 200% of normal rainfall. So very, very, very unusual by climatic standards. Our degree day totals for the season, back to the temperature here, still the same pattern that we've seen for much of the year. The totals here, if we assume a seasonal beginning of the 1st of May, and this is using the 8650 or corn degree days that you see on the back of your seed corn bag here, the totals range from less than 900 in the central upper peninsula to more than 1,300 or 1,400 actually along the far southern border of the state. So, and you can see on the left-hand side here too, the pattern is generally north to south with increasing totals. That's not so unusual, but it's a fairly large difference in total heat accumulation here this season as of the middle of July. And relative to normal on the right-hand side here, these totals range from a little bit behind in the central and western upper peninsula to fairly far ahead in the far south. You can see 150 unit surplus. That translates to several days, calendar days ahead of normal in the south. And again, for much of the growing season, we've been in that same general pattern with especially with above or with advanced growth and development and advanced heat accumulation across the south. Now, what I wanted to go back to again, with the moisture, if we look at climatology, how wet are the soils? And this is looking at the top 3 feet of the soil profile generally, and this is looking at a percentile. So where does the current soil moisture rank relative to historical standards or data, and all of the Midwest? Now think about that active storm track, and you can see much of the upper Midwest, so way back into the Red River Valley, the Dakotas, southern Minnesota, much of Wisconsin, and much of Michigan, northern Illinois, parts of Iowa. All those blue colors there, those are all high percentiles, and in Michigan, many cases in more than the 90th percentile. So soil moisture right now, if it seems wet, and it is, there's standing water in some areas, it's also wet relative to what the historical or the climatology tells us for this time of the year. And of course, the impacts with this are wide ranging. Some of them are negative. Of course, Marty's talked a great deal about disease, and we've certainly had a lot of moisture out there. Weeds, wheat harvest has been of course delayed by all the rain. So, and if you had to harvest forage or cut hay, boy, that's been a real challenge. You like the forecast though. But on the positive side, we look at this and the timing of this, and it should mean for much of the state, we should have no problems or very few problems, if any, with lack of moisture when we move into, well, we are starting to move into moisture sensitive stress stages, phenological growth stages of the crops. And that should not be an issue in many parts of the state this year, obviously, because of the excess moisture. Now, in the forecast, I mentioned a big change, a beautiful morning here today, high pressure. And I would note that this high pressure is courtesy of our neighbors to the north. It is a Canadian air mass. It's significantly cooler and drier than where we've been over the last couple of weeks. You can see the center of that out over southern Minnesota here this morning. And that's the dominant feature in our weather for the next several days. So it's going to be a little bit of a broken record. Today, we'll be looking at sunny sky. And if you look at this from a human perspective, and actually almost from a vegetative or plant perspective too, almost ideal or optimal conditions today. High temperatures generally from the upper 60s in the far north to the low and mid 70s in the south. Sunny skies, relatively low humidities, a little bit of a breeze out of the northwest, but just a delightful day to be outside. Today will probably be the coolest day of the upcoming week, the next 7 days. We'll get a little bit warmer tomorrow and on Saturday, but still the same high pressure will be with us. Here's tomorrow morning, the weather map. You can see the center of the high moves to northern Illinois. And then by Saturday, basically sitting right over the top of us. So there's sinking air aloft, just delightful, wonderful conditions. We will put a few degrees on the high temperatures and the low temperatures. The high temperatures generally in the mid and upper 70s north to 80 or the low 80s at tops here by the end of the weekend. So a little bit of a warming. Minimum temperatures from the mid and upper 40s, and we have some of those this morning in the northern part of the state, to the low and mid 50s in the south. So a couple degrees below the climatological normals, and then gradually warming. We'll be back up into the 50s for low temperatures here by the end of the weekend. You notice I haven't mentioned anything in terms of precip, because none is expected, at least in the short term. If you had to harvest or had to cut hay, this would be an almost ideal time to do that, with several dry days expected. The next chance for anything significant in terms of precip, probably not until at least Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. And even that is not looking like a major weather system at this point, although beyond that, we could be moving into a more active weather pattern. But the bottom line is, for the short term here, for the next several days, we are looking at just a beautiful stretch of weather, especially following for the southern part of the state so much heavy rain and persistent rainfall. So the precipitation totals projected here for the upcoming week are all below normal across Michigan and much of the Great Lakes region. Most areas less than 1/4 of an inch, if that occurs. And if this does occur, this would be what I talked about for the middle of next week. We don't see anything really of any significance here for the next several days. So sunny, fair, dry, and seasonably cool. That says it pretty much all for our outlook. In terms of water demand, potential evapotranspiration rates here, this is the reference value for the week, near to a little bit above normal because of the sunny skies and the low humidities, but generally talking about 1700ths to 1900ths. And again, that's the reference value for that grass covered flat unshaded unshaded surface reference that we use. But 17 to 1900ths per day on average is what we would see in a little bit lower, or the lower end of that in the north, and a little bit higher as you go south. So nothing spectacular in terms of water demand, but the water obviously in most areas is there. It has been there because of the rainfall. Now, medium range, a couple messages here. One major one, and that is for the next week, this highly amplified jet stream pattern over North America, and you can see this in the left-hand side here, it's forecast generally to continue or persist for at least another week, but then the guidance suggests that maybe we'll see some flattening out, more west to east flow. That will lead to some changes. And so while we have this upcoming week expected to be near or maybe a couple degrees even below normal in terms of the temperature, and probably drier than normal as well. I think that's another good bet. As we move into late July and into the beginning of August, the guidance suggests a more active weather pattern across the U.S., ridging out over the west. And so the 6 to 10, both the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks are pretty similar, and they suggest a return to warmer than normal temperatures, and that's what you see in the upper right. And then on the precipitation side, they're suggesting normal to a little bit above normal. I guess personally, I don't see that yet, but it could happen again by the end of the month. But I think the major message here, the take home, is that we do look for warmer weather once again, probably about a week to 10 days out, and then continuing through for the end of July and probably into early August. And with that said, that's basically connects well with our longer lead outlooks, which also call for warmer than normal conditions during August and even to the latter part, the end of the growing season and into the fall. We will have a new long lead ensemble outlook here. It's actually going to be issued later today by the Climate Prediction Center. We'll talk about that next week, but I'm thinking it's going to be pretty consistent with some of what you're seeing now. And so summarizing here again, ideal, beautiful conditions for the next several days. Nice break from all of the heavy rain and standing water, and basically near to a little bit of above potential evapotranspiration rates. And then, as you just saw, for the medium term, or the longer term here, probably getting back towards warmer than normal conditions before too long, a week and a half or 2 weeks out. And with that, I'm going to wrap up